Okay, so you're looking to really get a handle on something important, something changing fast, but, without feeling totally overwhelmed by information.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Well, that's exactly what this deep dive is all about. We've
Yeah.
dug into how strategic mission methods are shifting,
Yeah.
really adapting to today's world, and we've pulled out the key stuff from various articles on these new approaches just for you.
Exactly. We're looking at how things like the digital age, glowing cultural diversity, and just big global changes are really reshaping mission work.
Forget the old playbooks, right? We're talking dynamic strategies, innovation.
That's it.
Our mission here, if you will, is to cut through all that noise and bring you the surprising bits and the crucial insights about modern mission.
So you walk away feeling informed.
Exactly, ready to understand this shifting landscape. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Why the need for new approaches anyway? What's wrong with the traditional methods?
Well, it's interesting because the traditional ways, they often hit some significant hurdles. Think about the money involved, the high financial costs.
Right.
And sometimes progress can be quite slow, but maybe even more critical is, well, the world is just incredibly diverse, isn't it?
A mosaic, yeah. Not uniform at all.
It really is a tapestry of unique cultures. So that one-size-fits-all strategy, it might seem simple, but it often just misses the mark.
And can even backfire, right? Create
It
resistance.
absolutely can if it doesn't resonate locally or feels imposed.
Yeah, you can't just assume what works here will work there. Our sources really hammer home needing to respect those cultural nuances. And it's not just culture creating limits, is it? There are practical things, too.
Oh, definitely. If you look bigger picture, you've got logistical headaches. Getting visas keeps changing.
Always tricky.
Yeah, and the real emotional toll on missionaries, on their families, being away long term, these established models face real challenges now.
So it's not that the old ways are, totally broken. Yeah.
Not necessarily, no.
But maybe their effectiveness is just, limited in a lot of places today.
That's a good way to put it. Their scope is narrowing in some contexts.
But we're not talking about just throwing everything out, are we? It sounds more like combining the old and the new.
That's absolutely the key distinction. The sources talk about modern mission as this dynamic interplay.
Yeah.
You've got the foundational biblical mandates. The core mission hasn't changed,
Right.
but it's combined with a more agile, adaptable approach that actually fits the 21st century, honoring the timeless, but being relevant now.
Okay. Integrating tradition and innovation. That's where it gets interesting. How does that actually, look in practice? What are some examples?
Well, the integration itself is the key, taking those core principles and finding fresh ways to express them. So this is where you see a big move towards using digital platforms, social media, and a real focus on strategies rooted in local communities.
More collaborative, maybe.
Much more collaborative, yes, where local insights really shape the global outreach effort.
The digital age really has changed things, hasn't it? It's way more than just cat videos now.
Oh, absolutely. What's really transformative is digital evangelism and online discipleship. These aren't just add-ons anymore.
They're central.
They're becoming central pathways for building real relationships, fostering community. Churches starting online discussion spaces, offering resources for people who might never walk into a church building.
That makes total sense, meeting people where they actually are.
Exactly.
And the sources mention global connectivity, bridging cultural divides. That's huge potential, but I imagine also some challenges.
Definitely both. The potential is incredible, but it needs a very careful touch. You have to navigate cultural sensitivities, contextual differences online just as much, maybe even more.
Because it's so easy to misunderstand tone or context online.
Precisely. What works great in one digital space could, fall flat or even offend in another.
So no blanket approach online either. And this idea of virtual evangelism, it really does smash geographical barriers, doesn't it?
It really does. Things like online Bible studies, virtual worship services, even interactive digital storytelling. They're creating connections that, would have seemed like science fiction not that long ago.
Okay, so we've got the need for change, the mix of old and new. Let's get more practical. What are the key strategic shifts the sources are really highlighting?
Well, we've touched on digital evangelism and online discipleship already. That's huge.
Definitely.
But another really critical one is the shift towards cultural partnership and localization.
Okay, localization.
Yeah.
That's about making it fit, right? Making the message and methods understandable locally.
Exactly that. And crucially, it's about empowering local believers, local leaders, to really own the mission initiatives.
Why is that so important?
Because it fosters authenticity and long-term sustainability. Things driven mainly by outsiders often struggle with that.
Right.
When you present the core message through local voices, using local traditions, it just resonates more deeply.
And avoids that feeling of, like, cultural imperialism.
Precisely. Our sources actually showed something interesting there. Efforts that prioritize local leadership. They had a much higher rate of long-term success than those led mainly by external teams.
Wow, that really drives the point home. Okay, what's another key strategy?
The sources also point to interdisciplinary approaches. This is where mission work starts integrating things like education, healthcare, economic development.
Alongside the spiritual stuff.
Exactly, side by side.
So caring for the whole person, the whole community, not just one slice.
That's the idea. When people see tangible care, better schools, access to medicine, ways to earn a living, it often builds trust.
Opens doors for conversation.
It really does. It demonstrates a holistic concern, which can make people more receptive to conversations about, hope and deeper transformation.
Do the sources give examples?
Yeah, one shared a story about a medical clinic started by a mission group. It became this hub of trust in a community that was initially pretty resistant. And that trust eventually opened doors for, deeper talks.
That's a powerful example. Okay, and the last big shift mentioned is adaptive theological education. That sounds vital in a changing world.
It really is. It's about equipping everyone involved, missionaries, yes, but maybe even more importantly, local leaders, to think critically and contextually.
So they can navigate the complexity.
Exactly, to understand the unchanging truths, but also the very specific cultural landscape they're in.
It really does seem like everything keeps coming back to local ownership and empowerment, doesn't it?
It's a recurring theme, absolutely. Empowering local believers, local community leaders, it builds that authenticity and sustainability we talked about.
Because they just get it, right? The local nuances.
They have the cultural fluency, the deep insights. They're best placed to tackle the unique challenges their communities face.
But it's not like external teams just vanish, right? It's more like a partnership.
A true partnership, yes. Short-term mission trips, if they're done thoughtfully to support local goals.
Right, not just swoop in and take over.
Exactly. And digital support networks, too, they can be huge for equipping local leaders, giving them tools and resources to share their faith effectively.
And in places with restrictions.
That's where investing in local talent becomes even more critical. Supporting those grassroots movements that are, more acceptable and can really grow from within.
Now, let's talk sustainability. That seems like a huge challenge. How do you avoid just creating dependency on outside money?
That's a really critical point for long-term impact. The sources are clear. Relying too much on external funding can, accidentally create dependency.
You undermine the whole thing eventually.
Right. So sustainable strategies, they focus on local ownership right from the start. They involve local believers in decisions, and they even bring in something called economic discipleship. It's a fascinating idea.
Economic discipleship, what's that involve?
It's basically teaching practical financial skills, often rooted in biblical principles, to help people become self-sufficient.
So it's practical empowerment alongside spiritual growth.
Exactly. Equipping people with skills so they can support themselves, maybe integrate their faith with work or starting small businesses.
Like what kind of businesses?
The sources give examples like local pastors starting, say, a small coffee shop or a tutoring service to generate income for their ministry.
Ah, so it provides funding and roots the ministry in the local economy.
Precisely. It empowers people to provide for themselves and their communities, strengthening the mission's future. Really forward-thinking.
Okay, let's shift to church planting movements, CPMs, and this idea of discipleship multiplication. These sound really dynamic.
They are. What's compelling about CPMs is they're often described as these spirit-led, rapid, organic growths. Church multiplication happening from the inside out.
Driven by locals making more disciples.
Exactly. It's very grassroots.
Almost like a viral spread. What are the core principles making that happen?
Well, several key things. First, again, local ownership. These aren't directed from outside. Second, they use simple, reproducible church models, often meeting in homes, maybe online, focusing on the basics of community and worship.
Easy to copy.
Right. Then there's rapid reproduction, training new believers to immediately obey and teach others. That 2 Timothy 2.2 idea.
Learn it, do it, teach it.
Basically, yeah. And finally, they really focus on leveraging existing relational networks, spreading through families, friends, workplaces.
So less about big buildings, more about small, connected, agile groups spreading naturally. And how does discipleship multiplication fit in?
Think of it as the fuel for the CPM engine. Traditional discipleship can sometimes be about just learning stuff.
Right, knowledge transfer.
Discipleship multiplication is more active, obedience-based, often done in groups. The key is you immediately apply what you learn, and then you teach someone else to do the same.
So application and passing it on are built in from the start. The sources mentioned a 30-thirds process. What's that?
Yeah. That's a really practical structure lots of these groups use for their meetings.
Okay.
It breaks the time into 3 parts. Look back, sharing, accountability for what you tried to apply last week. Look up, engaging with scripture, focusing on obedience. And look forward, planning how to apply this week's lesson, praying for people, committing to share it.
Look back, look up, look forward. Sounds like a simple, repeatable rhythm.
It is very practical, fosters transformation both individually and together, easy to adapt to.
Makes sense. Okay, changing gears a bit. The sources also talk about strategic coordination and collaboration. It's not just Lone Rangers out there.
Definitely not. Moving beyond just isolated efforts towards strategic coordination is seen as really crucial for maximizing impact.
Like working together makes everyone more effective.
Exactly. One source even brings up Jesus' prayer for unity in John 17 in this context.
Wow. So what makes coordination work? What are the key parts?
Several things. First, mapping unreached people groups. You need to know where the needs are.
Foundational.
Then, open communication between different groups is vital, prevents duplication of effort, wasting resources doing the same thing. And it allows for truly integrated strategies, combining different approaches in a smart way.
Being strategic with resources, making sure efforts aren't redundant. Are there examples of groups doing this?
Yes, the sources mention organizations like the 1040 Window Task Force and the Global Alliance for Church Multiplication, GACX, as examples of groups trying to coordinate strategies, share resources, aim for greater collective impact.
Okay, now let's explore leveraging professional skills, tent making, and business's mission. Bam! This sounds like a really smart way in, especially where traditional missionaries face hurdles.
It really is. Tent making, like the Apostle Paul, involves professionals using their day jobs.
Their actual careers.
Yeah, their careers, their skills as the way to get access, build relationships, and just live out their faith in a mission context. Their work is their platform.
So it's about authentic living and working, letting faith show through naturally, not necessarily direct preaching all the time.
Often, yes. And business's mission, BAM, takes it maybe a step further.
How so?
BAM intentionally integrates business goals with the mission itself. It's about running ethical businesses, creating jobs, seeing the marketplace as a place for ministry.
Wow.
It can be really effective in communities closed off to more typical evangelism methods.
So creating value, building trust through legitimate business, which then opens doors for relationships and maybe deeper conversations.
That's the idea. Now, the sources also mention insider movements and church multiplication within existing cultures. Sounds very sensitive.
What does that mean exactly?
Insider movements trying to help faith communities develop from within the existing cultural narratives and structures. It's about respecting local customs, local leadership.
So faith grows organically within the culture.
Exactly. And church multiplication here is about nurturing new faith centers that are self-sustaining, locally led, and crucially, culturally resonant. They fit.
So not imposing an outside structure, but seeing faith emerge from within, led by locals. The key principles are developing leaders and those simple, replicable models again.
Precisely. Empowering local leaders, using those adaptable models so the movement spreads naturally and sustainably within that specific cultural setting.
We've covered a lot of specific strategies. Taking a step back, the sources talk about broader principles. Contextualization, empowerment, sustainability, integration. How do these tie it all together?
Yeah, these are really the foundations under all the specific tactics. Contextualization is about moving past potential cultural missteps of older approaches.
Making it truly local.
Truly adapting the message to local languages, symbols, traditions. Empowerment, we've hit this hard shifting from external dependency to nurturing local leadership, building resilience. Sustainability, we discuss self-sufficiency, integrating with local economies. And integration is that holistic view addressing spiritual, social, economic needs together.
It really paints a picture of a much more nuanced, locally driven, holistic approach overall.
It does.
Now, what about those really tough places, closed or restricted nations? Are these newer strategies making any headway there?
The sources suggest they offer more potential, yeah?
Yeah.
Traditional methods often hit brick walls.
Right.
But things like digital engagement, short-term, focused visits, and especially empowering local believers as the main agents, these seem to be more effective.
Digital makes sense, reaching people online when you can't physically. And empowering locals seems absolutely key in sensitive places.
It's often the only sustainable way.
What about the role of just, everyday believers? It's not all professionals, right?
Absolutely not. A big theme is that modern tools empower everyone. Ordinary people can engage through prayer, giving financially to support these strategies, engaging online, going on well-planned short-term trips that genuinely help local efforts, using their job skills like tent making, even just local outreach where they live.
Like 1 Peter 2.9, that royal priesthood idea?
Yeah.
Everyone has a role.
That's exactly the connection one source made. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a much more distributed participatory model. Everyone can potentially contribute something.
And finally, this idea of creative obedience. Sounds intriguing. What's that about?
Creative obedience is described as a willingness to take calculated risks, adapt methods for the sake of the gospel message.
While staying true to the core.
Exactly. Always rooted in Scripture. It's about being flexible, innovative, maybe even unconventional in how hope is shared and lived out.
So the examples we talked about, digital, CPMs, BAM, insider movements, they fit here.
They all fall under that umbrella, yes.
Yeah.
Creatively and obediently finding new, effective ways to fulfill the mission in a world that's constantly changing.
So thinking outside the box, trying new things, but always grounded in that core message. It's that dance between tradition and innovation we started with.
Precisely. That's a great way to summarize it.
Well, this has been genuinely illuminating, a real deep dive. It's so clear the mission landscape is transforming big challenges, but also some pretty incredible opportunities.
Yeah, it really is. And what stands out is that consistent shift towards approaches that are more local, more collaborative, and definitely more digitally savvy. It's a significant evolution.
So, for everyone listening, the key takeaways seem to be the absolute importance of cultural sensitivity, the huge impact of empowering local leaders, the potential of using digital tools wisely, and maybe fundamentally realizing that all believers have a part to play in God's mission wherever they are.
And that really leads to a final thought, maybe a challenge for you listening. How can your unique skills, your resources, your specific situation be used for missional impact in this changing world?
Yeah.
It's not just about understanding the trends, but thinking about your own role, right, in this ongoing journey.
Absolutely. Definitely something to chew on. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.